The rain had stopped hours ago, but the streets of Lagos were still slick with puddles reflecting the dim streetlights. A lone figure moved briskly along the uneven pavement, clutching a small bag as though it contained her entire world. Her name was Amara, the so-called no man's daughter, a label that followed her like an unwelcome shadow. Born into poverty and circumstance, she had grown up with the knowledge that the world rarely offered second chances, and when it did, they were never handed freely. You are welcome to my channel, my dearest listeners. Before we continue this story, I want to ask you for a small favor. If you like my stories, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. In the comments, let me know where you are listening from. It gladdens my heart to know where my listeners are based. Thank you. Amara's journey to this moment had been far from ordinary. From the crowded neighborhood where she had spent her childhood, she had fought tooth and nail for every scrap of dignity. She had refused to succumb to despair, even when whispers branded her as unworthy. But today, she walked with a mixture of fear and hope, heading toward a new life she had only dreamed of, the mansion of the affluent Obafemi family. The car that picked her up at the bus stop was sleek and black, gleaming like a jewel against the dull streets. Inside, the air smelled of polished leather and faint perfume. Amara's heart raced. This was a world she had only glimpsed in magazines and stories. She glanced out the window at the orderly streets, manicured gardens, and towering fences, and wondered if she truly belonged here. Her thoughts were interrupted as the car stopped at a sprawling estate guarded by high walls and security personnel. The gate swung open slowly, as though admitting her into a kingdom that would test her every step. "Amara," a voice called from behind the gate. "Yes, ma'am," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. A tall woman, impeccably dressed and radiating authority, stepped forward. This was Mrs. Obafemi, the matriarch of the family, and the person who would determine whether Amara's new life would be a blessing or a battlefield. Her eyes scanned Amara from head to toe, sharp and unyielding, the kind of gaze that could make the strongest hearts falter. "You may come in," Mrs. Obafemi said, her tone polite but cold, carrying an unspoken question. "Do you belong here?" The house was enormous, each room filled with expensive furniture, intricate decorations, and a sense of order that seemed almost suffocating. Amara's senses were overwhelmed. Everything was so pristine, so perfect, so alien. She followed silently as a servant led her to her new quarters, a room adorned with elegant fabrics and soft lighting. It was beautiful, but she felt like a guest in someone else's dream. Dinner that evening was a delicate dance. The family gathered around a long mahogany table, and Amara noticed the subtle ways her presence was scrutinized. Her attire, her manners, even the way she spoke was silently judged. The mother-in-law's eyes lingered with thinly veiled suspicion, while the father-in-law offered polite but distant smiles. Even the siblings-in-law seemed to measure her worth in quiet glances and barely concealed whispers. "Amara," the mother-in-law said at last, her voice sharp enough to cut through the chatter, "I hope you understand the standards of this household. It's not just about appearances, it's about behavior, and we have very high expectations." "Yes, ma'am," Amara replied, bowing her head slightly. She felt the sting, but she refused to let it show. She had survived harsher words, colder rooms, and greater humiliation. As the family turned their attention elsewhere, Amara quietly observed her surroundings. She noticed the subtle cracks beneath the perfect exterior, the strained smile of the father-in-law, the quick glance of his sibling hiding concern, the air of tension behind the polished walls. Something was off, though she didn't understand what. Later that night, alone in her room, Amara allowed herself a small sigh. She could hear the distant laughter of the family through the walls, a sound that was both comforting and foreign. She knew this would not be easy. She had walked into a world of wealth, power, and judgment, but she carried with her something they could not see: resilience. And somewhere beneath the layers of opulence, she sensed an opportunity, a chance not only to survive, but to prove that the so-called no man's daughter could be more than anyone ever imagined. The morning sun poured into the Obafemi estate like golden liquid, but it failed to warm the cold atmosphere within the house. Amara awoke to the sound of muted footsteps and the quiet clatter of breakfast preparations. She dressed carefully, mindful of every fold and crease, and made her way to the dining hall. The mother-in-law, Mrs. Obafemi, was already there, seated at the head of the table with her sharp gaze fixed on a newspaper. Her presence was commanding, a force that seemed to drain warmth from the room. She was the kind of woman who did not merely enter a room, she owned it, and everyone else existed in her shadow. "Good morning, ma'am," Amara said politely, trying to mask the nervous tremor in her voice. Mrs. Obafemi barely looked up. "Morning," she said flatly. Then, folding the newspaper with precise movements, she added, "I trust you slept well. Though I wonder if your upbringing allows you to understand the routine and expectations of this household." Amara felt a flicker of heat rise to her cheeks, but she kept her composure. "I'll do my best, ma'am." Her response seemed to amuse Mrs. Obafemi. A thin smile appeared on her lips, but it was devoid of kindness, more like a dagger wrapped in silk. Breakfast was a silent ordeal. Each family member moved carefully, acutely aware of the mother-in-law's scrutiny. Amara observed everything: the subtle roll of her father-in-law's eyes, the careful avoidance of eye contact by her siblings-in-law, the almost imperceptible tension that lingered like a thick fog. After breakfast, Mrs. Obafemi decided it was time to introduce Amara to the realities of the household. "You'll be responsible for maintaining your quarters impeccably," she instructed, her voice crisp. "And I expect you to adhere to every rule, every expectation, without error. Mistakes are a luxury we cannot afford." "Yes, ma'am," Amara replied, nodding. Inside, however, she felt a spark of defiance. She would not allow humiliation to define her. The day unfolded like a test she had not asked to take. Mrs. Obafemi found fault in small things: Amara's choice of cutlery placement, the way she arranged the flowers in her room, the angle at which she poured tea. Each criticism was delivered with the precision of a scalpel, designed to wound but never quite leave a mark for the world to see. Amara endured it all quietly, letting the words slide over her like water off a stone. Yet she paid careful attention. Every criticism, every remark revealed patterns, weaknesses, and the exacting nature of the household. She began to see the rules not as chains, but as a map. If she could navigate it cleverly, she could survive and even thrive. It was during one particularly tense moment that she noticed something unusual. Her father-in-law, Mr. Obafemi, moved slowly, favoring one leg, wincing as he reached for his cup. His illness, which the household seemed to tiptoe around, was evident. No one spoke of it directly, especially not Mrs. Obafemi, whose icy demeanor suggested denial or perhaps deliberate ignorance. Amara filed the observation away, her mind turning over quietly. She had skills, knowledge, methods she had learnt in her own hard-fought life that could be of help, but revealing them prematurely, especially to the mother-in-law, would be unwise. Over the following days, Mrs. Obafemi's scrutiny intensified. She tested Amara with increasingly absurd tasks, expecting her to fail. She marred her background with subtle jabs disguised as concern, comparing her upbringing to the standards of the Obafemi family. "You must understand," Mrs. Obafemi said one afternoon, eyes narrowing as she examined Amara's posture. "In this house, appearances are everything. Behavior, discipline, refinement, they are not optional. I expect you to rise to the occasion." Amara nodded, inwardly smiling at the challenge. Appearances, she thought, are all smoke. I will focus on the fire beneath it. Even as she endured the daily humiliation, she began to form a plan. The household's obsession with perfection was a tool, one she could subtly use, and the father-in-law's unspoken illness, the hidden gap in their pristine world, was a door waiting to be opened. For the first time, Amara felt the stirrings of quiet power. The Ice Queen might control the surface, but beneath it, Amara's resolve was growing. She would play the part of the humble, obedient daughter-in-law, all the while preparing to turn the household secrets into her advantage. By nightfall, as the family gathered again for dinner, Amara had settled into her role with measured precision. She smiled politely, avoided missteps, and absorbed every nuance of the household's inner workings. Mrs. Obafemi, of course, did not see the storm quietly brewing in Amara's mind. To her, this daughter-in-law was still just an outsider, a girl of humble beginnings trying and likely failing to fit into a world she would never truly understand. But Amara knew better, and she knew that patience was a weapon more potent than any word of defiance. The sun had barely risen over the Obafemi estate when Amara noticed her father-in-law, Mr. Obafemi, moving slower than usual, leaning heavily on the arm of his chair as he sipped his morning tea. His eyes were tired, lined with years of worry and suppressed pain, and for a brief moment, he seemed almost invisible to the bustling household. Everyone else pretended not to notice. Amara had been observing him discreetly for days, her instincts telling her that the illness he carried was more serious than anyone acknowledged. While the household danced around his condition, Mrs. Obafemi's denial cast a shadow over any discussion. She treated his frailty as a minor inconvenience, a flaw that must be hidden rather than addressed. "Father, are you feeling well this morning?" Amara asked softly, careful to keep her voice low so no one else could hear. Mr. Obafemi looked up, startled at the unexpected concern. Most people in the house were polite but distant, treating him with a clinical respect that kept human sympathy at bay. I am managing, Amara," he said, his voice tinged with fatigue. "It is nothing serious, just a bit of weakness, that's all." Amara studied him carefully. His posture betrayed him. His hand trembled slightly as he lifted the cup, and a faint grimace passed over his face when he shifted in the chair. She could see the layers of pride and duty that kept him silent, the unspoken burden he carried for his family's sake. This is no ordinary weakness, Amara thought. He needs help, and I have the means to give it. Her knowledge came from years of necessity and survival, from learning remedies and natural methods in the modest life she had known. While she was humble in origin, she was far from powerless. But revealing this in a household ruled by Mrs. Obafemi's judgment required careful strategy. One wrong move and she would be dismissed, or worse, humiliated beyond repair. Over the next few days, Amara began small. She watched his routines, noting what caused him strain and what brought him brief relief. She made careful, discreet adjustments, softening his meals for easier digestion, ensuring his resting positions were comfortable, and introducing subtle dietary changes that she knew would strengthen his constitution over time. Meanwhile, Mrs. Obafemi continued her icy scrutiny, oblivious to Amara's quiet interventions. She scolded her daughter-in-law for trivial mistakes, never noticing that Amara's discreet acts of care were slowly improving her husband's comfort. To the matriarch, Amara remained an outsider, a novice trying to navigate the opulent world she did not belong to. One evening, as the family gathered in the drawing room, Mr. Obafemi's condition became more apparent. He excused himself quietly, retreating to his study with a pained expression. Amara followed at a discreet distance, careful not to draw attention. She entered the study under the pretense of organizing books and observed him from across the room. "Sir," she said softly, "I think I may have a way to help you feel better, if you allow me." He looked at her with a mixture of surprise and relief. You would help me?" he asked. Most people in the house treated him as a figurehead, distant and untouchable. None had offered care beyond the surface-level niceties. "Yes, sir. There are methods I have learned that could ease your discomfort and improve your strength. But we must be discreet. Your wife, she would not approve of anything not sanctioned by her." He nodded slowly, a flicker of hope lightening his eyes for the first time in weeks. "Very well, Amara. I trust you." That night, while the household slept, Amara prepared a regimen of natural remedies and supportive care, administering them quietly and attentively. She felt a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. This was more than surviving humiliation. This was quietly reclaiming agency, using her knowledge to make a real difference in a world that had underestimated her. Days turned into a week, and subtle changes began to show. Mr. Obafemi's movements became less strained, his energy returning in small bursts, and his smile, rare and fleeting, appeared more frequently. Even the siblings-in-law noticed, whispering among themselves about the sudden improvement, though no one could name the cause. Yet Mrs. Obafemi remained oblivious, her eyes still sharp and critical, her disdain unchanged. She did not notice the transformation quietly unfolding under her roof. She believed she controlled the household, unaware that Amara, the so-called no man's daughter, had quietly become a vital presence, a source of care and wisdom that she could not comprehend. Amara knew that her secret gave her power, but she also understood that timing was everything. She would wait, continue her discreet interventions, and eventually reveal her capabilities in a way that could not be ignored or dismissed. For now, she remained the obedient, humble daughter-in-law, enduring cold stares and subtle jabs. But beneath the surface, a quiet revolution was taking place, one that would change the dynamics of the Obafemi household. The Obafemi estate was quiet that morning, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of servants going about their duties. Amara moved carefully through the halls, carrying a small tray of herbs and remedies she had prepared the night before. Her movements were deliberate, almost invisible, like a shadow slipping between worlds. Today, she would take her intervention further. Her father-in-law, Mr. Obafemi, had shown subtle improvement over the past week, but his discomfort was far from gone. Amara had devised a plan that required patience, precision, and discretion. She knew that any mistake could expose her, giving the Ice Queen, her mother-in-law, another reason to humiliate her. "Sir, may I assist you with your morning routine?" she asked softly as she approached him in the study, where he preferred to start his day in solitude. He looked up at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yes, Amara, I would appreciate that." She helped him with gentle guidance, administering remedies she had prepared and suggesting slight changes in posture and movement. Over the next hour, she carefully monitored his reactions, noting improvements and making subtle adjustments. His color brightened, his breathing eased, and for the first time in a long while, he spoke without hesitation. "You've been very observant," he said quietly, looking at her with a mixture of gratitude and wonder. "How did you know what would help me?" Amara smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. "I have learned to pay attention, sir. Sometimes what people need is not what they are told, but what someone notices."
Meanwhile, in the drawing room, Mrs. Obafemi paced back and forth, unaware of the quiet transformation occurring just rooms away. Her suspicion of Amara had intensified over the past days, though she had yet to find a legitimate fault. She believed she controlled the household entirely, yet the small, unacknowledged changes in her husband's demeanor were beginning to unsettle her. As days passed, Amara continued her discreet interventions. She prepared meals designed to improve his stamina, adjusted his daily routines, and administered remedies that gently alleviated his pain. Her efforts were meticulous, invisible, and effective. Gradually, the household began to notice subtle changes. Mr. Obafemi's steps were steadier, his conversations longer, his laughter more frequent, but no one suspected the source. One afternoon, the turning point came. During lunch, Mr. Obafemi, usually quiet and reserved, joined the family with an ease that surprised everyone. He engaged in conversation, smiled at jokes, and even offered praise for the meal, a meal Amara had subtly enhanced for his condition. The siblings-in-law exchanged curious glances. Mrs. Obafemi, however, noticed only her own irritation. "I don't understand," she said under her breath to no one in particular. "Why is he suddenly so well?" Amara maintained her polite composure, hiding the satisfaction that glimmered in her eyes. She continued to serve tea, arrange plates, and respond to the Ice Queen's critics with humility, all while knowing the truth. Her care had made the difference. That evening, she had a private moment with Mr. Obafemi. "Sir, you are improving steadily," she said softly. "I believe if we continue carefully, your strength will return fully. But we must be patient. The process requires discretion and time." He nodded, eyes glistening with unspoken emotion. "You've given me hope, Amara. I cannot tell anyone, certainly not your mother-in-law, but I will never forget what you've done for me." Amara's heart swelled with quiet triumph. She had endured humiliation, cold stares, and subtle cruelty, yet she had acted with intelligence, compassion, and patience. The Ice Queen believed she controlled everything in the household, yet the reality was slowly shifting beneath her feet. Mrs. Obafemi, for all her vigilance, remained unaware of the storm that had taken root. She continued to test Amara, to belittle her, and to assert her authority, but the seeds of transformation were planted. Amara had proven, without fanfare or confrontation, that she possessed knowledge and skill the Ice Queen could neither mock nor suppress. The turning point had arrived, not with anger or rebellion, but with quiet, undeniable effectiveness. Amara's patience, resilience, and wisdom had begun to alter the dynamics of the Obafemi household, setting the stage for a reckoning that would change everything. By the time the family retired for the night, Amara returned to her room exhausted but exhilarated. The Ice Queen believed she was winning, but Amara knew the truth. The balance of power had shifted, and soon the world that had humiliated her would have no choice but to recognize her worth.
The Obafemi estate woke to a crisp, golden morning, one that seemed almost symbolic of change. The air was lighter than it had been in weeks, and even the usual tension that hovered over the household felt diminished. Amara moved quietly through the halls, her steps calm but purposeful. Today, the results of her patience, intelligence, and care would become unmistakably clear. At breakfast, the family gathered as usual. Mrs. Obafemi entered the dining hall with her usual precision, her posture perfect, her eyes scanning the room for any trace of imperfection. She had been increasingly uneasy over the past week, noticing her husband's improved vigor but refusing to attribute it to anything Amara might have done. Denial, she thought, was easier than admitting she had underestimated her daughter-in-law. But the signs were impossible to ignore. Mr. Obafemi moved with a newfound strength, his voice clear and confident as he spoke to his family. His laughter, once rare and subdued, rang genuine and bright. The siblings-in-law looked on astonished, exchanging glances that betrayed both curiosity and respect. Mrs. Obafemi's gaze finally fell on Amara. She opened her mouth to critique, to scold, to assert control, but no words came. The silence was heavy,
charged with realization. Something had changed and she could not immediately place it. "Amara," Mr. Obafemi said, his tone calm but firm, "please sit with us. I have something to say." Amara's heart beat faster, but she remained composed, her expression polite, almost deferential. He continued, his eyes meeting hers. "Over the past weeks, I have experienced relief I thought impossible. My strength has returned and my condition has improved remarkably. No medicine, no doctor has done what has been done quietly in this household." A hush fell over the room. Mrs. Obafemi's sharp eyes widened slightly, a flicker of shock crossing her otherwise controlled face. She began, struggling to mask her surprise. "You've been involved in this?" Amara bowed her head respectfully, her voice calm and steady. "Yes, ma'am. I observed, I learned, and I helped in the ways I knew could be effective. My only goal was to ease your husband's suffering." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of the truth settling over everyone like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Mrs. Obafemi, for all her authority and cold precision, could not deny what she saw. Her husband was healthier, happier, and more energetic than he had been in years, all because of Amara. Mr. Obafemi reached for Amara's hand, a rare gesture in the formal household. "This young woman," he said, with his voice filled with warmth, "has shown intelligence, compassion, and patience beyond measure. She is not merely a daughter-in-law, she is a gift to this family." Even the siblings-in-law, previously distant and judgmental, looked at Amara with newfound respect. Murmurs of admiration rippled quietly around the table. Mrs. Obafemi struggled to maintain her composure, but the truth was undeniable. She had tried to humiliate Amara, to assert control, and to belittle her humble origins, but Amara prevailed not through confrontation or anger, but through quiet competence and resilience. Finally, she spoke, her voice measured but softened. "Amara, I misjudged you. Your actions have proven your worth beyond my expectations. I see now that strength is not measured by birth or wealth, but by courage, intelligence, and heart." Amara inclined her head, her humility genuine but tinged with quiet satisfaction. "Thank you, ma'am. I only sought to help." The atmosphere in the household shifted that day. The Ice Queen, though still formidable, began to see Amara not as an outsider, but as a member of the family, respected, valued, and necessary. Amara's patience, endurance, and skill had not only healed the father-in-law, but had transformed the dynamics of the household itself. By evening, the estate felt different. Conversations were lighter, laughter more frequent, and the tension that once gripped every corner of the house had eased. Amara walked through the halls with a quiet confidence. She had endured humiliation, cold judgment, and relentless scrutiny, but she had emerged victorious, not with vengeance, but with wisdom, care, and grace. As she looked at Mr. Obafemi reading in his study, healthy and content, and the family moving comfortably around the room, Amara allowed herself a small, victorious smile. The storm had passed, and in its place was something stronger. Respect earned, bonds forged, and a place in a world that had once sought to reject her. The so-called no man's daughter had become indispensable, her presence no longer questioned, her worth finally recognized. The Obafemi family had been transformed, not just by her remedies, but by her spirit. And in that transformation, Amara had found her triumph, her dignity, and her home.